Hugh is the chairman of White & Case, one of the truly great global law firms. He is a Canadian based in New York. He's flown in specially from Pebble Beach, California, so I'm not quite sure what time zone he's on. But he's been a great supporter, a great contributor to the IBA, and also a great contributor to Russia over many years. And in fact, for 10 years, I think, you were running the White & Case Moscow office. Possibly used to have hair before then, but it's been a formative experience of his career and has led him on to greatness within White & Case. So, Hugh, the question I want to ask you, truly global law firms have only really emerged over the last 10 years or so, and the pace at which global firms have developed has really been tremendous. I was just thumbing through this best-selling publication, 12 Months in the World of White & Case, hot off the press here. And in the evolution of a firm like yours, Hugh, 12 months is a long time. So just looking back over the last 10 years, but more interestingly perhaps for this audience, looking forward over the next 10 years, what's it actually mean to be a global law firm? What does that signify in terms of scale and scope and activities? And bearing in mind that you're operating in a market where it's not entirely your free choice which jurisdictions you operate in and how you operate.
Thank you, Stephen. There's a lot in that question, but I'll go through it quickly and touch on some of the elements of that evolution from my point of view. I think the central idea of the global law firm is one that has its roots in a very simple idea, and that was, in our history, we grew up as a New York firm, and we had a visionary leader who came to believe that the market should not be New York, but rather the world. That was a very radical idea. And it was partly just based on an insight that the world was going to globalize, that the economy would globalize. And it was also, like all good ideas, born of a necessity, which was that he felt that New York was a mature legal market, and that for us to grow and prosper as a firm, we needed to look outside New York. So that was the basis on which we transformed ourselves from what was a local firm, fundamentally local firm, New York firm, albeit a large local firm, to become international and to grow step by step to pursue opportunities outside of New York. And this was decades ago at a time when that was viewed as an idea and less of a reality. And then we've been on a decades-long journey to build office by office, lawyer by lawyer, a global brand, first international and then global brand. And that's an ongoing journey, and it never ends. And indeed, you can ask yourself even, is any firm truly global today? And I'll come back to that in a moment. What happened in the interval was that over time, as the global economy became truly more evident, many other law firms gradually realized that it wasn't enough to believe that staying in your location and your place would assure you success or even survival. And one by one, the large law firms began to realize that if they didn't have capability outside of their own home market, they would lose their clients in their market, one by one. So the clients themselves pursued a path, how are we doing back there? Pursued a path of following their clients around the world. So for a long period of time, they felt insulated from that economic reality, and over time began to realize that in the battle for global work, to pursue and serve clients globally, working only within their local markets would not allow them to maintain those relationships, right? So one by one, we've seen law firms come to believe that developing a scale and scope outside of their home market was necessary to survive. 10 years ago, there were only 4 law firms with over $1 billion of revenue. Today, 10 years later, there are 20. And we may ask ourselves what the future will hold. We've seen in the last year alone the largest number of mergers among law firms in the history of the profession, over 96 reported mergers. We see the largest number of openings of offices around the world, over 56 in the last year alone. Offices outside of the home jurisdictions of the country, of the law firms. So the paradigm has shifted, and it's now become a norm. It's not to say that everyone necessarily wants to be a global law firm, but the larger law firms realize that they won't survive on their own, and therefore you see this enormous combinations going on with increasing size and frequency over the last few years, and that will continue. Of course, global law firms aren't everyone's solution. But I believe that the pace of growth among the large law firms will accelerate, that it represents an increasingly powerful force of magnetism, bringing lawyers together from all around the world. That does not mean only mergers. It means alliances. It means combinations and relationships. But that is the overarching dynamic in the law industry today, and one that will increase. And why will it increase? Really for 2 reasons. One, our clients demand it. So in serving our clients, the most profitable work that they do is typically work involving multiple jurisdictions. So to serve those clients and to pursue the high-end legal work requires capabilities beyond any one place. And the impact of that is that we'll see increasing growth for the strong global law firms. We'll see increasing consolidation among law firms that have global aspirations. And what does that all mean for all the lawyers of the world, young and old? I think we're left with some very stark choices. I think one is to join the currency of the future in one form or another, and to become part of and not resist the combinations, the ability to serve our clients effectively across borders, which will be the driving force of the future. The other option is to specialize. And by specialize, I don't mean being small. I mean specialization where a practice uniqueness is sufficiently powerful that it can nevertheless assure a place of survival in the market. I think another choice is, of course, to ignore it. But I think that the general practitioner, the medium-sized law firm that is a generalist in one place, is doomed and will not exist in the future before us. And a final alternative is to become part of the new entrants in the legal arena And by new entrants, I mean legal process outsourcing, alternative business structure models, where increasingly non-lawyers are entering the legal space and reinventing it. It's too early to say what the impact of that will be, but I believe it would be profound, and it will change very dramatically those who believe that the status quo will survive. Finally, another possible reaction is to erect barriers in the face of globalization, barriers to entry, as many countries have done, in the hope that the law firms that I describe as not having a future will be able to maintain their market position. But what I've come to see and believe, and I don't defend it or praise it, is that no barrier to entry will stop over time the forces I'm describing, and indeed may accelerate the changes in reaction to regressive kind of barriers to entry. So, I say none of this with pride or conceit that anyone has the answer to the future. I just tried to describe to you fairly the dynamic that I've observed around the world in the course of my own career, and having studied the industry as much as anyone, offer you my own thoughts on how it will evolve. I'll stop. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Hugh. Now, I hope you're all thinking of... Oh, there, sorry. Well-deserved round of applause. I hope you're all thinking of some questions you can pose later on, but you're going to be hearing from the panelists before we get to that stage, because we want to give you a number of different perspectives. So we've given you the perspective of a global firm viewed from New York. Now we're going to switch continents and give you a global view from Asia, a new global firm created in Asia. And this is a very exciting development, and to talk about this, we have Wang Ling, who is the PRC managing partner of King & Wood Mallesons, a firm created by the merger of a leading Chinese firm and a leading Australian firm. So, Wang Ling, tell us something about what led to your decision to have this merger, and what sort of firm you're going to be leading in 10 years' time or more.
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, and well, I think one of the key words among this section is talking about globalization. And just now, Stephen also mentioned, well, like truly global law firms like One Case and Allen Overy, and it has been, well, and they have been there. So since last year, when King & Wood and merged with Mallesons, so also some questions were raised to us. And are you going to put globalization as your goal or as your target? And well, how do you look at even including from the merger between King & Wood and Mallesons? So today I'm very delighted to share our views and how we look at particularly if we look at the strategy for the development of the firm, maybe for the next 10 years. And for me or from the firm, actually we prefer to call this our step, like the merger between King & Wood and Mallesons, is part of internationalization, not like a globalization. That is, we try to enhance the capability of the firm and to serve our clients. That is also, well, part of the, step, try to satisfy our clients. Later, I will talk a little bit about the China market and also including the market itself and the legal market in China. The combined firm, and we still focus on the Asian Pacific area. That is our home jurisdiction. That is our strength and so I think we still focus on that. And when I'm talking about internationalization, actually we try to upgrade our quality standard to that level, and then could surely provide a high and quality services to our clients. Like other firms and development of the firm, and it is try to follow how the market, how the client developed. If we look at the economics market in China, it is indeed developing very quickly. Although in the past, these 2 years, the GDP growth a little bit lower than in the past, 10 years. And the market now, if we look at the 10 years before, 2 years ago, in China market, GDP growth and keep more than 10%. And last year is about 7.8. And so there was some discussing about the market a little bit downturn in China. But at the same time, still, we noted that the China market, particularly a lot of Chinese companies, not only big state-owned Chinese company, but also now many China private company, they are trying to go abroad and to expand their investment. Several years ago, such investment may more focus on the natural resources, energy, but in the past 2 years, many investment, and you may note that also going to the manufacturing, high-end technology area. The law firm in our services, we try to follow up and try to satisfy the needs from our clients. So that is a part of the reason, and the firm, we try to expand our development, including like by merger with medicines, and we set up more cooperation with the other firm, and then together we could bring more capability to our clients. If we look at the China legal market, actually, the China legal market is quite young, and it is just a little bit more than 20 years since we took the partnership law firm in China. So still, you may find in China, although there has been a lot of law firms in China, but it's quite the structure quite different, and the focus on is quite different. There is a big gap, and within the China legal market, surely at the same time it developed very quickly. These 2 years, and you may note that there are several Chinese law firms. They also going abroad, set up their offices in the other jurisdiction, or by way of a set up association or quite close cooperation with the local law firm in the other jurisdiction. So we may take a different approach when we go abroad, like our clients. But I believe one of the reasons is the Chinese firm try to, based on their development or on their situation, try to find the appropriate way which match to their development. in the market. So if we come back to our firm, and actually we still try to focus in our clients' basis and try to provide and more strong capability and to our clients. So I think that is one of the main reason and for the firm when we look at to expand our business to the other and maybe some like a jurisdiction, but still in most cases we more, if we look at those transactions, still based on the cooperation with the local firms there. So I think and our model is one of the approach for Chinese firms to set up. So it is quite different from the development or globalization of the other firms. So in my understanding, there will be like a different definition or understanding when the firm are looking at how you look at and what is the appropriate strategy for the development of the firm for the next step. So that is what I want to share today. Maybe later we could have a more discussion on that. Thank you.
By the way, there are some more seats over this side, so any of you looking for a seat, you will find some over there. Now, we've had two views of the world from outside of Europe, and now we're going to turn to Europe, a part of Europe that sometimes thinks about its position in Europe, namely the United Kingdom. And we're going to have a slightly different perspective from the UK, not from one of the large London-based law firms, but from a barrister. As many of you will know, in the UK we have a split profession between the solicitors and the barristers, amongst many other things, are the people who do predominantly the advocacy and the litigation, the cases, the arbitration. And to talk about this, we have another great authority, Michael Todd, the immediate past chair of the Bar Council of England and Wales, and the head of one of the preeminent barristers' chambers in the UK. So Michael, what I wanted to ask you about was how this process of globalization, internationalization, has affected the conduct of disputes and litigation around the world. How is your world and your fellow barristers' world been changing over the last 10 years, and what's the barrister of tomorrow, the global advocate of tomorrow, are going to look like?
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's fair to say the effect of globalization on the bar has been quite dramatic, just as it has been dramatic, I think, in its effect on law firms as well. I remember many years ago, and it was, I regret to say, far too many years ago, when I first came to the bar. We used to be in a very small group of people working together. We work in what is called a set of chambers. And the bar was very much smaller in those days. There are now about 12,000 barristers in practice. There are about 140,000 solicitors working in law firms. So the bar is a very small profession. It was, as I say, when I started, very, very small indeed. It was very inward-looking. It was just domestic. There used to be the odd case, if you were lucky enough to get a brief in Hong Kong, and we used to try and get in there if we possibly could. But really, predominantly, our work was undertaken in the courts in the United Kingdom, in our case, in England and Wales. Globalization, as I say, has had a dramatic effect. I think when I started, I think traditionally the bar has been thought of, and I don't say this with any pride at all, I can assure you, was being thought of as a bit of a gentleman's club, at least when I joined it. And people used to deliver their legal services when they wanted to, in the way they wanted to. And they used to expect people to come along to see them in meetings. And if we wanted to write a 50-page opinion letter, then we'd do it. And it was very much on our terms. Globalization, I think, has brought a massive sea change to the way we operate. I consider myself now very unlucky if I write more than 2 opinions a year. Globalization, I say, is very much has been a catalyst for change for some people. For other people, particularly at the bar, it's rather like rocket fuel to speed up change. Initially, I think when globalization came along or hit the bar, or at least we woke up to the fact that we were now operating in a global legal services market. I think just as with law firms, if I can speak for them, the bar became fatter. There was much more work around. People were taken on, people were recruited, and the bar certainly became very much larger than it had been when I started. And it became fatter as everybody wanted a greater share of the pie. And so we used to take on more people and try and get as much work as possible. Now, it's quite different again. Now the bar has become fitter. It's no longer fatter, it is fitter. And that comes as a result of increased competition from other lawyers, partly from the law firms, partly from lawyers in other jurisdictions. But what we now see is that instead of delivering our legal services in the way which we thought we would, we now expect and are expected to meet the demands of our clients. And the globalization, I believe, has caused us as barristers to look at what we do, how we do it, and to see whether we can deliver our legal services in a different way. Now, I've made those very general comments. They apply just as much to the transactional work which some barristers do, but also to the advocacy services we provide. What we see with globalization is that we offer our legal services to different people in different markets, and the basis upon which we do that is we have to develop specialisms or specialization. Now, at the bar, there are many different forms of specialization. There are the specialist advocates, and they are the people you will always want to instruct when you have a particularly difficult case. But there are other specialisms as well. Some people will be expert corporate lawyers. They may be intellectual property lawyers. And what the bar has been doing, and is doing, I think, successfully, and will be able to do even more successfully in the future, is to provide those specialist services. There may be advocacy services, they may be specialist advocacy services in the corporate field, but they can provide those specialist services to law firms around the world. And we can go to, of course, we can't practice everywhere in the world. We can't practice always in civil law jurisdictions. But what we can do, and what we do try to do, is we say to those law firms in, say, civil law jurisdictions, when your client has a piece of litigation in a common law jurisdiction, you can buy that service in from us. We're not an overhead, just buying the specialist services you need. And when you've had all you want, then we go. We don't compete in the same way that law firms do. We are just, if you like, people outsource particular parts of their work to us. And that, I think, is a model which I think the bar will take forward in the commercial field, providing these specialist services in the way that clients want, in the way that law firms want. And it enables the law firms, be they domestic or foreign, to continue to service their own clients with whom they've built up those all too important relationships, and at the same time buy in the expertise which they don't have. It doesn't require, it provides the service to law firms which enables them to keep their clients rather than, let's take a client or a law firm in a, say, South Korea, civil law jurisdiction. They have their relationships with their clients, but if their clients, and they are, as we all know, very, very keen on maintaining those relations, or in Cayman, or in Hong Kong, then we can go along to those law firms and say, we can provide those specialist advocacy services, which you are unable to do. And so I think what globalization has done for us, and what it's done for the future of the bar, is to make us look at what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and how we can better meet the demands of both our clients and of our law firms. Thank you.
So now we've heard three different perspectives on globalization from three different parts of the world, but we've not yet heard from Russia. And that is now going to be remedied by two contributions from Russia. The first contribution will come from Andrei Goldsblatt. Andrei is the founder of Goldsblatt, a Russian firm which a few years ago merged with a major international firm, Berwin Leighton Paisner, BLP, to form Goldsblatt BLP. And so he's really been at the forefront of the evolution of the Russian legal services market. And so what I wanted to ask you, Andrei, was what was the motivation for you in taking your firm into this combination with BLP? What does it mean in practice? How does it actually work? What difference does it make to your clients, for example? And how is this going to evolve? How will the combination look in another 10 years' time? And what lessons do you think there are from this for the rest of the Russian profession and indeed lawyers from around the world from other jurisdictions which have not historically been the home of major global firms? And I think Andrei and also Vladimir, who's going to speak after Andrei, are going to make their contributions in Russian.
Спасибо большое, Стивен. Да, если можно, я тогда по-русски.
Thank you very much, Stephen. If I may, I would like to speak in Russian, otherwise I may get everyone confused. Indeed, about 5 years ago, we merged with BLP, and we're now one company. We're Berwin Leighton Paisner, but in Russia we have a brand Goldsblatt BLP. It wasn't my company. It was a company that we built with Mr. Pepelyaev, and it was called Pepelyaev Goldsblatt and Partners. We created it in 2002, and we enjoyed very good development until 2007. Then it's all a question of ambitions. It's all a question of what different partners feel about the future of their company. How far these ambitions go is the issue of whether or not both partners see the same way. And I felt uncomfortable, not because I had problems with my partner, but because I realized that over the 7 years that we enjoyed as one of the leading legal firms in Russia, people were able to get a lot of information. We did not work in isolation. There were a lot of other Russian companies, and there were a lot of international and global companies working side by side with us. I realized that I was in charge of all practical issues except for taxes. I realized that a lot of other companies, foreign companies, global companies, had a different point of view on future development. And in order for me to be able to show something new to my clients, I had to make certain compromises. I had to be able to lose some of my power, maybe some of my controls, but I wanted to preserve my team. At the same time, I didn't want to face certain limitations. I wanted to move far further. There are a lot of Russian companies, national companies, and we deal with them very often. But I thought that we wanted to pursue our ambitions.
Also, it is a matter of some sacrifice, because you, as a leader and the founder of a Russian legal firm, if you are not ready to share your power due to your mentality, if you are not ready to share some material benefits, then definitely you cannot speak about any model of development. I am ready to share my authority and power. That's fine for me. What is important for me is development, is moving forward and enriching experience and knowledge. The idea that was behind this merging was getting new markets, new projects, and new clients. As I said, that was 5 years ago, and if I recall what we were doing in the area of merging and acquisition at that time, Slaughter and May, that was they were giving to us some orders, and that was mainly some due diligence on Russian law and also some expert opinions for their transactions, and we were absolutely happy. And now, mergers and acquisition, this is one of our leading areas. We have one English partner and one American partner. They work in our Moscow office, and we have done a lot of transactions, and we do it on our own. Both Slaughter and May now don't give any transaction to us because they mainly use strong local companies, and they work with other companies. And definitely now we have an absolutely different feeling, and we have opened new horizons for ourselves, new communication, new clients. And we have accumulated them due to this communication. And we also have very good financial practice, because in the past we didn't have that. Because, of course, without having international mechanisms, without knowing them, you won't be able to provide any financial support. So this is a totally new horizon, totally new area, new deals, new projects, and this allowed us consolidating, and it doesn't mean that we are the only possible model of development in Russia. No, other models are also possible. But the question should be different, whether it is possible to develop your legal practice only within the country. Because there are issues of education, of regulation, whether we are able to educate young lawyers, those who go to our universities but not abroad, and can they understand what a loan is, what financing is, what bonds are, and so on, because nobody teaches them that. They learn all this in practice in Clifford Chance and other companies. Then they go to the United States, and they come back after that knowing this. So our educational system is not ready to train such specialists. That is why we have a question: how can we compete in our national legal environment? What are our resources? So I believed that the most successful model would be a merger with those who are ready for this institutionally. And I believe that the practice of our cooperation And now we maybe shouldn't speak about cooperation because we are one company, one integrated company. And I hope our office in Moscow is excellent, and we have excellent team there. So, and it will, in February, we will celebrate 5 years, time flies, really, and I see that within these 5 years we have been developing very actively, and that was the right decision, and the model we chose was absolutely correct, and I'm not saying that everybody should follow it, but what we see in the market, according to Vedomosti publication, Vedomosti magazine, we see that our legal market, we see that there are more and more companies appearing. I don't know whether it is good or bad, but according to this Vedomosti, they observe a trend that big national legal firms in Russia, they establish new companies, smaller companies, and representatives of such firms are here with us today. This is very good, and this makes us very alert. And I believe, this process is developing. And again, according to that Vedomosti publication, why is that? Because when you grow, and I noticed some time ago already, because a young lawyer, a graduate, okay, they want to start somewhere, okay, and okay, they drive this very cheap old car, but there are airplanes flying above, and when you grow to a certain point, and when you develop your professional knowledge, and when you have bigger ambitions, and when you don't see any opportunities for their growth, they establish their own companies. That is good. They have energy and they have enthusiasm. There are not so many people who are ready now to start up their own company. When I did that, a long time ago, there were just, about three big legal companies. And now, to start from scratch in this area, in Russia, it is extremely difficult. So the national market will be developing. And I'd like to say again, our model is not something to copy by everyone. No, we selected this model within certain situation, and we had a strategy and we had our vision how the market and companies would be developing. But it doesn't mean that 100% Russian companies cannot develop here. It all depends on the companies' understanding and their readiness to do it. Thank you very much.
The moment is almost here when you get to participate in this debate. So we're really relying on you to have some good questions and contributions, but not quite yet, because we have one more speaker to hear from before we get to that stage. And it's another slightly different Russian voice now, from Bratislav Zabrodin, who is the managing partner of an independent Russian firm, Capital Legal Services, somewhat smaller, fast-growing. And what I'd like to ask you, Vladislav, is what has been the motivation for the creation of your firm, and how do you, as an active participant in this Russian market, see the evolution of your firm and the evolution of the market? Are you expecting more similar firms to emerge? And what are the competitive advantages that a firm such as yours has in competing with the other types of firms we've already heard from?
Спасибо, Steven.
Thank you very much, Stephen. You know, life, as I see it, brings so many different alternatives. And if we look at the situation from the point of view of this huge number of alternatives, and you know, there are so many different shades of gray. In our profession, for every option, there are niches and opportunities. And the experience I had is very interesting because it concerned work both in a foreign company, and I worked in a foreign corporation abroad, and I studied there. And also, I have this experience of starting a Russian legal firm. So for me, it was a legal continuation, because when you are in one position, you understand what specific limitations exist in that format where you are functioning, and how you can cope with these limitations. And if you understand the future or potential of another format, then you can decide on your own whether it is acceptable or not for you. There's one more thing. Andrew is absolutely right, saying that, yes, a great number of lawyers, especially very young lawyers, graduates, universities, they go to international legal companies because they have interesting big projects. But we shouldn't forget that those young lawyers, they can work on very small pieces of those projects. So this is just elements of a big puzzle, and they don't contact with customers, and sometimes they don't even understand what the whole project is about. There's another thing which has a certain significance. Many Russian firms were established in quite a difficult situation. 1992, 1998, we all are aware of a crisis that took place at that time, and the establishment of an independent company was a certain signal of boldness and readiness, because at that time people had to be sure that in order to compete with international companies, you need to understand their strong points, and you also need to understand what is critically different in your services from those companies. And however it may sound, but limitations of Russian companies due to a number of people, a number of amount of resources, and a number of projects they are working on. They always have a resource, and I believe it is quite cheap, but at the same time there's great demand for it. It is identification who you are and how you can compete in this market, and if you make the right decision, then you will be competitive. When we speak about globalization, I believe globalization is a positive factor. It is a positive factor not only for international companies, who in those prospering years to enrich their mass and ensure they are working all over the world. But also that was a good opportunity for smaller local firms, because that was a chance to accumulate that unique knowledge and experience which is available. Now, some time ago, a colleague of mine said, can you imagine now, with just a couple of buttons, I can reach any partner in any city of the world? But for me, it was not a revelation at that time, because, modern media of communication, because they are available to all companies. So I, using 3 buttons, I can reach any lawyer in any city of the world, and I can work with those lawyers on any project their customers or my customers have. So the diversity of these opportunities, technological, and unlike our Prime Minister, I'm not ready to get rid of my iPad for the time of the forum. This is what he did during the first day of this forum. And I believe technological gadgets and programs, whether it is a small company or a big international company or just an individual lawyer, they give us flexibility. And customers we work with, they see our services, they perceive it, equally. they see it in the same way. And the level of communication and the availability of databases, for example, that exists in other countries, this evens out our position in the market. And if you make yourself use all of those things that the world is ready to share, then you can compete even with very big legal firms. And we have seen it many times when partners who come from a different age, they don't use the electronic means of communication, and for them it is a serious problem. We, for example, we work with an interesting company in New York. A partner of that firm doesn't use electronic means of communication, so because they have secretaries for that. So there are specific things important for every company, and legal services, however global it is, still it is a personalized service. It is impossible just to use your brand for providing a service. Of course, always it is a specific person, and whether a company is ready to share its culture with every lawyer, it is important, and whether it is possible all over the world. Of course, when there is 40 people working in a company, it is easier to ensure one corporate culture if you have thousands of people working all over the world. So the world is diverse. It's so different. It offers us so many opportunities, and I believe we shouldn't underestimate some of them and overestimate others. And I believe that the modern system of communications and technological development provide us with equal opportunities. There are equal opportunities for all lawyers. And Andrei is right that every legal firm is looking for their own way of development. And in Russia, yes, due to and the fact that the market of legal firms is quite a special market, and there are not so many partners in it. Very often it is a vision of certain people who are heads of those companies. So looking for decisions is quite, and solutions is quite individual. And I believe we need to consider that globalization is an advantage, and if we are able to use this advantage to the full extent, then the world, although it will be very integrated, but at the same time it will be very pleasant and diverse in terms of its opportunities. Thank you very much.
There are still plenty of rush away, because this is the moment when you come into your own. You can really participate in this debate. And so there's a lady at the back. Now, if you could stand up, and with a bit of luck, somebody is going to bring you a microphone, which will enable you to be heard by the translators, and also will enable you to announce who you are, as well as placing your question. So we'll give you a microphone. And we had another hand. Where was the other hand? Okay. Yes, if you could give this gentleman down here, put your hand up again, a microphone for the next question. So first the lady at the back.
Thank you very much. I have a question to Michael Todd, please. And I will have, in fact, two questions from two different positions. Both of them are quite brief. The first one will be, I will ask him it in Russian, sorry, if you could put your back.
As a former partner of a Russian legal firm, I would like to ask the following question. On the one hand, for independent Russian legal firm, it is very interesting to have a chance to instruct barristers directly if he's working in court somewhere in the UK. This is important. My question is, what specifics, or what problems, what issues you see in such a situation, and are there any ways how these can be overcome? For example, I myself faced the following problem. Maybe I'm mistaken, please correct me. As far as I understand, there is a regulation Bar Council that specifies to barristers, for example, to meet clients only if a solicitor is present. And, for example, a Russian lawyer can be such a solicitor, so an instructing solicitor for you in such a case. This is just one of the problems. Maybe you can name some other problems as well.
Asking you as a solicitor of England and Wales, I'm working with Simmons & Simmons, London, in the litigation department. And so my question is now to you again. Of course, we're working with barristers on a regular basis, with different barristers depending on the case. And my question to you, which is connected with the previous one, do you see, of course everyone sees that the difference between solicitors and barristers in England is now a little bit blurred. And the first question which Russian clients ask me when they approach me with litigation, or potential litigation, they ask me what is the difference between solicitor and barrister and why we need barrister in our case, etc. So what is your view on this, and how do you see these two professions in the future? Thank you.
So, Michael, a double whammy, two different questions in two different languages, but for one of the leading silks in the UK, no problem in handling that, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to give both answers in English, if that's okay. The first one, yes, Russian lawyers, foreign lawyers, not just Russian lawyers, may instruct the bar directly. You do not need to go through an English law firm. You may think it's advisable to go through an English law firm in particular circumstances. One thing that you may well need to do is to issue proceedings. Barristers at the moment, because of our regulations, are not able to issue and serve legal process. And so it may be in those circumstances that you would need to, you could come directly to the barrister to obtain the advice as to the way forward. And then the barrister could pass you on to, or suggest or recommend to you, a law firm which would be in a position to issue legal proceedings. That is changing. Our regulation is going to soon allow us, our regulators are soon going to allow us to carry out or to conduct all litigation services, including issue and service of legal process. So no, you don't need to go through, the answer is you don't need to go through a law firm for particular things you may want to. Barristers tend to, when they're not performing advocacy services, but transactional advisory services, they will tend to advise on particular aspects of a transaction rather than the whole of a transaction. Law firms do that much better than we would be able to do. They have the expertise and they do it. But law firms will come to us on particular issues which may arise during the transaction. So I think, yes, you can come directly. We soon will be able to do everything for you. At the moment, there are a few things which we can't do, but we are in a position to give advice as to how to proceed. And I would say this, wouldn't I? It's a good idea to get the bar's advice early on, because at the end of the day, if you end up in court, you'll be going to that barrister, that advocate, to perform the advocacy services for your client. The second question is the distinction, relates to the distinction or the blurring of the distinction between solicitors and barristers, solicitors, law firms and barristers. Yes, the distinction has become blurred. Now more solicitors wish to perform advocacy services, although it is fair to say, I think, and I'm looking at Julia Bateman here, is from the Law Society, I think it is fair to say that generally solicitors would not perform advocacy services in the higher courts, in the Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, or the First Instance Court. But just as some solicitors are performing some advocacy services, so too are barristers doing more transactional work than they ever used to. When some 800 years ago or whatever, when we all set up what we do, essentially the bar were the advocates, and that was it. But the bar now provides, I would say this, wouldn't I, high quality advisory services as well to law firms and even direct to clients who have got in-house counsel. They can come directly to the bar. Why do you need a barrister? You need let me say this in two instances. Firstly, if you want the high quality advocacy services or the advocacy services in the higher courts, you'll probably need the barrister because law firms tend not to conduct their own advocacy. They may do more in arbitrations, but not in the courts. The other reason, I think, is this, that the bar, when they specialise, I'm a corporate lawyer, so we perform specialist corporate advisory services. And we did, and in providing those services, we provide it direct to in-house counsel, or we provide it to law firms, and the whole gamut of law firms in London, the whole range of law firms in London and in England and Wales. So that even great firms like Stevens, Allen and Overy, will come to counsel for advice on particular points of law. And it's not just because, it's not that they don't have the expertise in-house, but of course we are referred instructions from all of the different law firms from a number of different perspectives, and so in a sense we're a clearinghouse for that knowledge. I mean, Stephen's firm may come along and pose one question in one way for a particular client, we'll know that we'll have considered that question, or likely to consider that question, for a number of different on different transactions for a number of different solicitors. So in a sense, that's the worth of going to the bar for advisory services, because we are becoming much more specialist in our advisory services, and that is quite frankly the way forward for the bar. And we, as I say, we also provide specialist advocacy services. So that's why I think you need to come to the bar.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, supplementary briefly?
Very briefly, yes, because I think thank you very much for your answer, but I think you didn't answer two questions from my two questions. The first one, I have completely no doubt why you need a barrister, because I'm involved in a number of processes. I know why you need a barrister. But rather my question to you, why barrister needs a solicitor, and if needs? And the second question was, and the second question was related to the first part. The first part, I asked you what sort of challenges you can see in direct instructions from either in-house lawyers or foreign law firms, if you have, of course.
Michael, can I just ask you to be brief in those answers, because I know we have other people waiting to ask questions.
It's always bad to ask a barrister for a question if you want any brevity. Why does a barrister need a solicitor? A barrister will need a solicitor to perform those parts of the transaction or litigation services which the barrister is not presently able to perform. So that is the reason. We cannot, and I use the example of issuing and serving legal process. That is one, but that will soon go. Soon you will not need a solicitor. You may choose to go to a solicitor, but you will not need to. Secondly, what challenges do we face, do I see, when people come directly to the bar? I think a major challenge that we face is our ability to, because we're all self-employed, our ability to put together teams of people to work on the client's particular transaction or case. Now, we can put teams together, but law firms, and so that is a challenge for us. We also have, it's fair to say, another challenge that we face is that traditionally we have been the referral profession, so we haven't dealt so much directly with the client. And so it's a new ball game for us. But they are challenges which the bar is working hard to overcome.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Now we have a question over here, and then we have another question over there. So maybe we could move the microphone over there. But carry on, sir. Ask your question.
Добрый день. Позвольте, я по-русски. Влад Сурков, партнер юридической фирмы Кингамп. Я, позвольте, задам вопрос, который до сих пор еще не обсуждался. Если угодно, о будущем юридических фирм. Я представляю мир юридических фирм. Владислав говорил о том, что фирмы бывают разные, глобальные, национальные и так далее. Но есть ощущение, что у нас в последние годы всех...
We are united by the same thing, that the business is not going as it was, we expected it to go. First of all, the illegal firms have become to earn less. Clients have changed. English translation and interpretation is here on this channel. Are you with me now? Yeah, many companies have become to earn less. Many companies have fewer revenues, smaller revenues. At the same time, many companies, non-legal companies, non-legal corporations have been developing very actively. They're developing, actually, they have teams of 150 or maybe 100 persons. This is, I think, a provocative statement. And sometimes people would say that legal firms in the format which they are now will not survive for a long time. But there's another school of thought. They say that there will be great differentiations. There will be 100, not 100, maybe 10 or 15 high specialized law firms, or those firms who specialize on border transactions will survive, and there will be a great gap between this upper crust of the legal community and the rest of the legal firms. So I would like to have your opinion. What do you think about such doomed, say, gloomy predictions? If I may, I will start to respond. Many of you saw the Russian movie Moscow Does Not Belong Tears, and some people, there was a phrase there, the theater will die and the television will survive. And I think that this is a discussion about the thing which will go on until the moment our profession exists, actually. And I think that the situation is that the business models are very various. And it's not my fault, sorry. Why? It seems to me that illegal firms which started from in the green field are now on the top of the food chain now, because the people who started law firms on their own started from the zero ground, so to speak, and they understand in what way it is possible to survive, and there is nothing for you to survive upon. Partly, this is not the main reason, but this is a very serious precondition why many young people, not young people, look at large international firms as a lucrative place for employment, because large international firms provide stability, and on top of that, use their name to sustain your own renommé. We're speaking about young leaders. This is the easiest way. No matter how strange it may seem, this is not a bad way. This is a wrong, correct way. It has every right to exist, but this is the simpler way. I would not say that we feel worse, have felt worst over the last few years. We're not faring bad. We're getting better. Well, our revenues are changing in format and structure, but we are not earning less. So I believe that one of the advantages of small structures is that they're more flexible. They allow themselves to more respond to the situation quietly without concurrence of 400 or 2,000 partners to make a decision. And this is one of the great advantages of the contemporary world. Of course, we understand that it is balanced or recompensated by the fact that they do not have much resources to spend for development, no, in terms of financial resources or human resources. So they have to be more pointed in the activities, but I still believe that TV and theater will continue to exist side by side and go hand by hand. Yes,
let's go to this questioner down here. And then we'll come to that gentleman up there if we can move a microphone up there.
Hello,
Carry
my
on.
name is Robert Jotka. I'm from the Baltics, from Lithuania, regional law firm Varol, a managing partner in Lithuania. Well, my question would be probably in the first line to the international partners of the international firms, to Hugh and to Stephen, but of course to the whole panel as well. Well, the question would be concerning the liberalization of the legal profession as such. Well, obviously, in England and Wales, there is, since some recent years, you have the regulation that anybody essentially can own a law firm. So anyone can invest into a law firm. So it's not just a privileged right to lawyers as it was before. And obviously, this is the first and the only country, as much as I know, in the world with such a regulation. So what is your opinion? Will that regulation spread? First of all, that will investment funds and other investors be allowed to invest into law firms? And to your opinion, how that will change the globalization and kind of expansion of global law firms? How it will change your business?
Hugh, do you want to have a go at that? Alternative business structures, are they making a difference? Is the rest of the world going to catch up with England and Wales?
Yeah. So this is a very profound question. It's one of many of these very huge swirling forces, right, that make the future difficult to see. So it's been inconceivable in our professional lifetimes that there would be non-lawyers carrying out legal services. Now for the first time we have this. It's not just the first time, by the way. It's in Australia, New Zealand, other places. So, you know, we always feel, and perhaps this is arrogance, that, you know, we are able to, we as large firms, not just me, but all the large firms, we feel that we're able to do what we need to do without the need for outside capital. So generally, we've looked at it as not impacting us. I mean, broadly speaking, until fairly recently. But I think the change now is such that, imagine a private equity firm, for example, that applies the discipline and say picks a very narrow area of law practice, very narrow, maybe very narrow sector. And you talk, Vladislav, about the difficulty of consulting with thousands of partners. This private equity firm won't be consulting with anyone, right? They'll bring business process discipline. They'll make a ruthless business out of a very narrow sector. And then how will that work? How will it work? Now, all this will be driven not by the lawyers or what they want to see, because who cares what the lawyers want? It'll be driven by the clients. What do they feel that they get from that service? And if it's successful, they'll go back to that place. Then, of course, the large law firms and every other law firm will then begin to react and say, wow, we can't compete in this sector or that area. So it'll take chunks out of the businesses that we all are in, if they're successful. Remains to be seen, right? Remains to be seen how non-lawyers will manage. But I think it deserves to be taken seriously, and I think it will crack open the legal industry. The question is, which segments of the industry are going to be the most affected if they are successful? That's the question.
And when, of course. And when. And when, of course. How quickly it will happen.
Well, how quickly, right. Well, right, how quickly? Well, it takes how long for them to learn and decide. Accounting firms went into legal business 10 years ago. They were more or less complete failure. They retreat. Now they're coming back, right? Now there'll be a new entrant in the marketplace with all the power of their platform and business processes behind them. Okay, how long will that take before we see the impact? I think it'll be faster than we believe. Again, who will be most impacted by these new entrants is the question. And I think the generalist law firm that is sort of going along because they have a monopoly in the place and they kind of do everything for everyone, they don't have the discipline, they sort of don't really work very well, very effectively, they will be the victims of their success, if they are successful.
So now we're going to the back of the room up there, and then there's also a lady here as well. So we'll have the gentleman at the back first, microphone just making its way to you, and then also if we could give a microphone to this lady down here to go second. Sir, your question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Redmond. I'm an attorney from the United States, and I'm part of a mid-sized law firm. We have 700 and some attorneys throughout the U.S. The issue is that in 2007, 2008, when substantial financial problems occurred, our firm picked up a lot of clients because they were trying to reduce rates, reduce cost. We also ended up merging over that period with several firms It took about 2 years for integration. And so my issues with that predicate are two. One is that as firms become global, generally they take on much more expense because of the overall cost. And so at some point, are the global firms going to price themselves out of the market that clients get to the point of saying, you're too expensive, we can't afford you, we don't want to pay for all the infrastructure that you have. Second issue is, what are the cultural issues? How difficult is it to integrate people from different areas? You know, Russia, the United States, UK. How much difficulty does that cause in establishing a global firm and keeping the firm proactive and working with everybody through the process?
Wang Ling, do you want to make a comment on that? And then maybe we'll go to Hugh. What's happened to your pricing and how are you dealing with integration?
Well, what I could share is a little bit different since you see our merger and just started since the last year, but we since from day one we are on the track of the integration from the brand name to the practice and to the people. Well, first I think and the most important is the people. People need to know each other, and then could achieve in the integration with the other practice and the cooperation and also others. So if we look at the integration part, I think and we are still on the way, just starting. But so far so good, and maybe I believe Stephen and Hugh could share more information about their integration, and they have done a lot of merger, particularly including the well-established market and the emerging market. Thank you.
Hugh, do you want to comment? Are global firms becoming too expensive, and how do we integrate within global firms?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of thoughts. You know, the big law firms may be like dinosaurs, right, that are just too big and cumbersome and they die and some other creature will carry on. It's possible. But it won't be, we won't price ourselves out of existence. The clients will just go somewhere else, right? They'll go to other law firms, cheaper. And we haven't talked about this, but legal process outsourcing in India or smaller boutique firms, et cetera. Many firms in either different locations or structured in different ways will be able to provide cheaper pricing than the great global law firms. Now they know this, they're not stupid. So they themselves are reinventing to try to find ways to provide low-cost services as well and have the capabilities of, for example, in Alan Overy, Stephen may be too modest to say, he builds a sort of a outsourcing facility or insourcing in their case in Belfast, where they put low-cost lawyers to provide legal services in order to address this very problem. Perhaps it's a function of the recession, but probably will carry on. Now, is that a complete solution? Time will reveal. Now, on integration, and by the way, when we talk about pricing, most lucrative legal work, and think of it, it's when a Russian corporate goes overseas to do an acquisition or raise capital or fight a major international arbitration or dispute. This is where the legal fees are the largest. I don't say this in greed, I just say that's the case. So long as that's the case and the clients are prepared to pay the most for it, it will track the business around it, whether through global or other firms. So there are sort of two competing strands there. On integration, look, I mean, I think all global organizations have integration problems. The bigger you are, the harder to integrate to make it work together. If a big law firm can't work very well together, it has none of the advantages of being international, right? Because it won't be seamless kind of service. It has every disadvantage of being big. It will die. It will die. So the premise of the big law firms is their ability to work together in a seamless kind of way. But it's not true that big means they can't work seamlessly and small means they can. You have some of the greatest dysfunctionality in smaller firms just as you have in big firms. But that's the central challenge really to all law firms, but especially for the cross-border work, because it magnifies the difficulty of working together in an integrated way.
We'll get a comment from Michael, and then we'll come after that to the lady down here.
I'm just going to be very quick about this. There's a very interesting model in the UK market at the moment, and that's the model put forward by Quinn Emanuel, a US firm. They've set up a an English partnership. And what they do is they have a number of partners. They have very few associates, practically no trainees, I think. And they're very low overhead. And it is said, whether it's correct or not, that their profit margin is 68% on their fees. And that's a model they're using, and they outsource the work to different organisations, maybe to the bar, maybe to other smaller firms.
So, question here. Now, this will be the last question of this segment. Then we'll have a short break, but don't fear, if you have other questions, the next panel is going to have plenty of question time too.
Spasiba, dobry dzień. My question will be in English, and it's Caroline Sexton from Ernst & Young. I'm a specialist in BPO, and I've worked on a number of corporate restructures as well, so BPO is of special interest, especially in terms of process re-engineering, which is very relevant for law firms, particularly in the UK. And this question is actually more of a build on the question that was mentioned earlier from the gentleman from the Baltics firm, which is, as we're all aware, there's been a lot of change recently in terms of alternative business structures in the UK. And basically, there have been a number of lateral hires and new opportunities around providing new products and approaches to delivering legal services in the UK. And I would be especially interested to know, particularly from Andre and Wan Ling and Vladislav, in what ways have you perhaps introduced new business processes in your firms? In what ways have the lessons that have been learned in the UK been adapted perhaps back in your practices in order for you to deliver more competitive services in an increasingly saturated market, for example, in Moscow, where I've heard saturation is an issue, and also, of course, lawyers aren't regulated.
So, business processes, legal process, outsourcing. Andre, do you want to have a go at that first, and then we'll come down to the other end?
Yeah, thank you. Хорошо. No, the business process is obviously quite advanced in an international environment, and I could tell you, I don't know about the other Russian law firms, don't want to say anything or criticize or be happy about them, but what I definitely learned from the lessons when we moved, that business processes are now more advanced, the technologies are more advanced, the time recording, time counting, the financials are more advanced and help a lot to collect and to build the clients. And as long as we're global and we've got offices in London, Singapore, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, Brussels, Paris, Germany, having an integrated network communication is an excellent tool to work with. And all the other systems are fully integrated within each office. The lawyer sitting in Singapore, they have the same tools as I'm sitting in Moscow. We're going to call easily, dial in 4-digit numbers to call him. I don't have to dial +7 355 274 80, then call star, then 25, and somebody can answer your question. Just simply dial 4-digit numbers, and I get my partner in Singapore. Same things he can do. And it's very sufficient, and it can't compare, obviously, what was previously.
Is that answering your question?
Yes, to an extent, but I suppose more specifically, perhaps locally in Moscow, in terms of perhaps generating new product ideas and also being able to differentiate yourself through added value services and innovation, whether, being able to introduce new business processes has enabled you to be more competitive by, delivering more innovative products.
New products and services.
In terms of legal services, yeah.
Andre, let's let the others have a go at that bit of it.
I just got a perfect answer to that, but okay. You can
no, carry on. I'd hate to cut you off in your pride.
No. Well, obviously, there's quite a modern trend on saying that we need to provide innovative solutions. We need to provide innovative technology. We need to innovate the same way as Rosnana innovates, otherwise we're going to lose the market. And I believe first in quality and the perfectionism of the lawyers and the way of delivery of the services. And we obviously innovate, but we rather innovate and promote the business, not a business process, because we rather would rely on the global business processes and provide our support and recommendations, or to make sure that if something doesn't work, it's addressed in a proper way and changed. And in terms of marketing, we do a lot more different things than we do globally, having market specifics, understanding the market, the clients here, and sometimes we share our experience with the other offices from Moscow. I don't know if you answered this time the question, but I tried hard.
So we'll ask Vladislav, we'll ask Wan Ling, and then we'll have the coffee break. Vladislav.
Actually, the question is, I think, quite important. In our case, it was a bit simpler, probably because we started the firm on the remainings of McDermott, Will and Emery, so we used at that moment of time their technology and their processes and their approaches. But, you know, life is developing very fast, so technically, at this moment of time, what you have to understand, whether it's you believe this is a value that will help you to be more competitive on the market later on, and whether you're going to invest into this now. And that means that technically at the moment we are looking around all the time. Every time meeting with any international law firm, we're asking this question. Anytime looking around, we're seeing who are the local producers, who are the local developers of the technologies, who are leaders in this field, and we are learning this all the time. So that's the process, and that requires resources. But at the same time, you are quite flexible, because in this case, you are able to get the best of the world and try to, you know, implement this in the office.
And finally, Wan Ling, are you innovating?
I'm not sure whether I'm exactly get your questions, but the one to share, you see, if I look at it in the two parts, one is actually, you may note it, the China managing partner, so I focus on the China market. So when, from the firm, and we try to follow and try to help our clients to create more like a new structure or product to our clients. That is most of the, and including the Chinese clients and also multinational clients. Another part is we try to advise our Chinese clients going abroad. And depending on the jurisdiction which the transaction is located, and then we may have working together in a cooperation with a local firm to support our clients. So maybe, I'm not sure whether exactly your questions, but maybe later we could share more. Yeah.
Stephen, if I may, just a couple of words. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. I suppose coming from an audit firm and also building quickly on Hugh's point about how perhaps audit firms are in some ways, I think you were saying 10 years ahead in terms of the way that they have restructured and generated added value services. I would suggest that perhaps some opportunities going forward for global firms will be particularly around knowledge transfer of added value products. Clearly, there is the capability to do that more slickly, I suppose, if you've got the capability in place and the infrastructure to be able to show those kind of good ideas. But also, and actually this is getting, again, to the heart of the topic of this discussion, is around the management of firms. And in order for that to be successful, there needs to be some consistency, I would imagine, across such a large global geography. So I think those are the two main challenges going ahead for an effective global law firm looking forward. Thank you.
We're going to leave that hanging in the air. Now we're going to have a very quick coffee break. I think just 10 minutes, which will allow a seamless shift over of the panel. So grab some coffee, bring it back in, or have a quick break, but then come back soon.